Hey vinyl community, Mark here from Sound Matters. Today we're talking the most expensive vinyl records ever sold. Now I think we can all admit that collecting records isn't exactly the cheapest hobby, but some of these are going to blow your mind in terms of what a single buyer could be willing to pay for just one record. So starting at number 10 on our list and working our way down to number 1, we start with a release by the British DJ Saramanga Silk, and the record in question is called Choose Your Weapon. And while this is actually the cheapest record on our list at a mere, $40,095, it's actually the most expensive record ever to have changed hands on Discogs, which is pretty interesting. I mean, that's a lot of money to exchange for one particular promo record, right? But I mean, for that to be the most expensive on Discogs but not the most expensive record ever exchanged, we're only going up from here. It's going to get pretty eye-watering in terms of the amount of money spent. Now, what is Saramanga Silk Choose Your Weapon? Well, it was a gatefold self-release promo of two halves, if you like. You've got the record and also a CD on one half, and then on the other side actually contained an art print and also a poem etched into the acetate, right? So pretty interesting release, and it was actually the only time that it's come up on Discogs, so it's pretty easy to see how it might have escalated in price in terms of what people were willing to pay for it. And you can only imagine that whoever bought that record had a pretty sentimental or emotional attachment to that particular project and that particular record. Number 9 on the list is Aphex Twin Caustic Window, which was actually due for release commercially in 1996, but for whatever reason at the time it never saw the light of day. That is until a group of people from an online music forum called We Are the Music Makers, forum about electronic music, all clubbed together to buy one of the very few test pressings that surfaced on Discogs in 2014. So they created a Kickstarter campaign and offered everyone who took part in that campaign to try and buy the record a digital copy of the test pressing. And once that Kickstarter campaign was finished, it was then subsequently auctioned off, and the buyer who bought it for $46,300 was Marcus Pearson, who is actually the creator of the game Minecraft. Number 8 on the list is a 10-inch acetate copy of the Beatles' Till There Was You, which sold at auction in 2016 to an unknown buyer for £77,500, or the equivalent of over $100,000. Now, it was dubbed a kind of holy grail of Beatles records at the time, which is perhaps not surprising given that it has handwritten etchings from the band's manager, Brian Epstein. It was found in the attic of fellow Liverpudlian musician Les Maguire, who is thought to have come across the record during his time in Jerry and the Pacemakers. Now, that's a pretty neat piece of music history right there. Number 7 is the Beatles compilation Yesterday and Today. Now, there's nothing quite like a band or a kind of rare album cover to raise the price of a record. Now, early copies of the 1966 compilation from the Beatles Yesterday and Today, which was only released in North America and Japan, by the way, featured the infamous Butcher cover, or what was dubbed as the Butcher cover, right? So it features the Fab Four, all four members of the band, draped in kind of bits and pieces of dolls, like broken apart dolls with meat spread across them as well. It was considered quite kind of controversial at the time, and eventually it was swapped out for a less controversial album cover, subsequently leaving those early copies with the Butcher cover to skyrocket in value. Now, in 2013, a mint sealed copy of this record sold for an astonishing $125,000. Number 6 is Frank Wilson's legendary 1965 single Do I Love You? Indeed I Do, which was actually until recently number 10 on the list in terms of the most expensive records ever sold. That is until in 2020 a UK-based multi-millionaire by the name of Lee Jeffries purchased the record himself for over £100,000. Now, the reason it's so rare is that there are only rumoured to be about 5 left in existence. The story goes that there were over 250 copies, but the Motown boss Berry Gordy at the time, when he caught wind that one of his producers was trying to launch a music career, he ordered that the copies of them be destroyed. Seems a bit mean, but it means that these remaining few copies are now astronomical in value to those who care. Number 5 is John Lennon and Yoko Ono's Double Fantasy. Now, undoubtedly, having a record signed will raise the value, but this is no ordinary signed record. This particular copy was signed on December the 8th, just hours before John Lennon's death, and so subsequently the owner of this record owns what is most likely the last record ever signed by John Lennon. That's an incredible piece of history. In 1999, a copy of this record sold at auction for $150,000. But wow, to own the last record signed by John Lennon, that's an incredible piece of music history. Can you put a price on that? Number 4 on our list is a complete signed copy of the Beatles' Sgt Peppers. Now, if having one signature from a Beatle wasn't enough, try getting all 4 members to sign a record, and in this case it comes together. Now, anyone who's tried to find original Beatles records will appreciate that they can be pretty expensive even without any signature on there, and sometimes in pretty poor shape. They can still fetch pretty reasonable amounts. Now, not only was this signed by all 4 Beatles, it was also the very sought after monocopy with the black Parlophone label. Now, this particular copy of a priceless and also classic record went to an American bidder in 2013 for a whopping $290,500. 3 on the list is Elvis Presley's first ever recording. Now, an acetate copy of My Happiness was sold to none other than Jack White in 2015 for $300,000. Now, it's no secret that Jack White is a huge fan of the vinyl format. Obviously, his record label Third Man Records, in terms of their Vault series, very vinyl focused. They've done a lot of direct to disc series stuff as well, so it's perhaps no surprise that somebody like Jack White owns one of the most expensive records ever sold. Now, quite proudly, he used this purchase to create a really faithful recreation of the record to sell through Third Man Records, complete with authentic looking brown paper bag as a sleeve. As he said, that's how Elvis would have left the studio with it back in the day. It's a really nice recreation, and I think a good thing to have done with that purchase to recreate a little bit of history. Number 2 on this list is the Beatles' White Album, but not just any copy of the Beatles' White Album. This is the first ever copy off the production line, and we know that because, of course, the Beatles' White Album was serial numbered on the front. The number of your pressing is clearly listed on the front of the record. Now, it's a well-documented fact that Ringo Starr was the proud owner of 0000001, the first ever White Album off the production line for many years, until in 2015 when he auctioned it off for $790,000 in the United States. Now, if we dismiss the last record on our list as a little bit of a one-off and a novelty, this is actually the most amount of money that's ever been exchanged for a commercially released record, making it the most expensive commercially released record. So, the slight anomaly and number 1 technically on our list is a WuTang album from 2015 called Once Upon a Time in Shaolin. Now, the album was recorded in secret by the band and then was auctioned off in 2015, the same year, for a huge sum of $2 million, but it came with some pretty specific contractual agreements. So it was sold to former hedge fund and drug company manager Martin Shkrelikan, who was under contract with the sale that the record could not be commercially exploited until the year 2103. However, since the sale of this record, Martin Shkrelikan has been in some hot water for securities fraud, and the record was subsequently confiscated by the US Department of Justice, and since then has been sold on for $4 million to a crypto company who essentially want to make it an NFT, or a non-fungible token. In any account, $4 million for a single record however much money can be made with an NFT of the project is a mind-blowing amount of money to spend on one record. So that concludes today's list of the most expensive records ever sold on the market. Some of those prices are pretty mind-blowing, aren't they? I mean, we've all spent probably too much or more than we care to admit on a single record, but that's just a whole other level. But what's the most expensive record you have in your collection? What's the most you were willing to pay for a single record? Let us know down in the comments below. If you're new to this channel, please do consider subscribing, and we'll see you in the next video.